All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Susan Bowden, and I'm the Digital Outreach Coordinator for the Archaeological Conservancy. We are really glad you joined us tonight for meteorites found at or near ancient ruins in Central Arizona with Ken Zoll. Tonight's lecture is part of our 2023 series, and it's made possible in part with grant support from the New Mexico Humanities Council. If you're looking at the list and you see one of the lectures that you're interested in but you missed as a live presentation, don't worry, because you can find archives of all of our lectures plus those from previous years on our YouTube channel. Before we start tonight's lecture, I want to remind you of a few things. First of all, please feel free to use the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen to ask questions during the presentation. We will have time for a few questions at the end of the lecture, and we don't want your question to get lost in the chat stream. Second, if you have technical difficulties with sound or video, try heading over to our Facebook page where you can watch the live stream during the lecture. And then third, we are recording tonight's lecture, and it will be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. If you're registered, which you are if you are attending tonight, you will receive an email after it's posted. And now tonight, I am very pleased to introduce our speaker this evening. Ken Zoll is a founding member of the Verde Valley Archaeology Center and Museum in Camp Verde, Arizona, where he was the executive director from 2012 all the way to 2022. When he retired, he was named the Executive Director Emeritus. Ken is also a featured presenter on Arizona Archaeology for Best of Sedona Rhodes Scholar Program of Northern Arizona University. He is the author of 6 books and several articles on archaeology, rock art, and cultural astronomy, and he continues to study, teach, and write. Welcome, Ken, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and take my presentation down so that you can take over, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll get my presentation rolling here. Got it rolling. Okay, so obviously my topic tonight is meteorite use among ancient peoples of Central Arizona. A couple things. I always start with a disclaimer. I am not a registered archaeologist. I am not a degreed archaeologist. My degrees were in accounting and finance. But when I retired out here to Sedona in the middle of Arizona 20 years ago, I'm only 10 minutes from one of the archaeological sites on the forest, and I became a volunteer with the Forest Service for several of the archaeological heritage sites. And in the process, I was thinking, well, my hobby in Chicago was astronomy. I wonder if there was some way I can tie this in. And lo and behold, I became involved with archaeoastronomy. And actually a founding member of the Center for the Study of Cultural Astronomy, the American Southwest, and started to apply some of the techniques of cultural astronomy to sites within the Verde Valley, working closely with the archaeologists for the Coconino to get a permit for research and development. So altogether, we've already documented about a dozen archaeological sites. Some of them are sun watcher seats, where I could document that a sun watcher sat 1,000, 2,000 years ago and watched the horizon to tell time. And then got into the use of rock art with shadow and light to be able to tell time. And at that time, I came across a very small, I'd say even obscure article about a meteorite that was found within a ruin within the town of Camp Verde, or near Camp Verde, on the Coconino National Forest. And that started a whole new area to explore with that cultural astronomy, and is the basis of this presentation. What you'll find by the time we're done here, this is basically a work in progress towards a paper that we're putting together with Arizona State University's Center for Meteorite Studies. And so you're kind of getting a sneak peek of what that paper is going to conclude. And so I'll get going with that. So basically, meteorites have been found at many ancient sites over the years. By the way, you'll notice I say ancient sites. The museum includes on our board of advisors the Hopi cultural director, And the culture out here is by archaeologists referred to as Sinagua, which is a Spanish term meaning without water. When they came out here and they saw these ruins, they weren't by streams and rivers and oceans like they were familiar with finding in Spain. And so they referred to the people as the people without water. And the first people who came out and studied the area just took that, the Sinagua. And the Hopi are not thrilled with that name. That's a Spanish word referring to their ancestors. Similarly, that they did not care for the word Anasazi referring to their ancestors. And so up in the Four Corners area, it's referred to as the ancestral Puebloan people. And down here in the Verde Valley, they would prefer we use the term Hisatsinome, which is a Hopi word for the ancient ones or the ones that came before. But they don't mind the term ancient. They don't like prehistoric. So I try to use that as much as I can if I don't slip into the old ways. So the map here shows you a lot of the meteorites that have been found at archaeological sites. There's a list of them over on the right side. When I give my full talk on meteorites, I talk about all of them and show all of them there. But tonight, I'm just going to focus on the ones that are in central Arizona, which are highlighted with red dots as well as outlined in purple. So you're probably wondering, well, why did they collect meteorites? What did they mean to the people? And there's several sources and ways that we can understand what meteorites meant to them. For example, the Hopewell culture in Illinois and Ohio, meteorites fragments were found on altars, and fragments were made into beads and different tools. The fascinating thing about the Hopewell, Illinois, Ohio meteorites is that the meteorite is, they analyzed it, and basically it was the fragments from the Brenham, Kansas meteorite. So it was a meteorite that fell about 14,000 years ago in central Kansas, and through trade or however, the Hopewell people became aware and acquired some of the fragments and used them. Many people are not aware that there was a meteorite found in Mesa Verde National Park in the Sunshine House. It's found by Jesse Walter Fuchs, who was a Smithsonian ethnographer at the time. And he found it. And when he found it, he said that he thought that it was placed there at or about the time of its construction. And he referred to it as being on an altar. A big one, Casas Grandes at the Pacuame United Nations World Heritage Site down in Chihuahua, Mexico, was about a 3,500 pound meteorite. And when it was found, it was actually in a subterranean, semi-subterranean room. It was so large, they probably just found the cap of it. They dug out around it. They basically built a room around it and then wrapped it in a porcelain cloth, which is referred to as a mummy cloth. And within that same room were several human remains, likewise wrapped in mummy cloth. And so this ritualistic reburial you're going to see several times in my presentations that go along here. The Willamette meteorite in Oregon is the largest iron meteorite that has ever landed in the United States. And it was dug up about 1902 and eventually made its way to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. However, it was regarded as a sacred object by the Clackamas Indians in that area. And they were obviously very upset when it was taken away. Their belief was that when it was delivered by the sky people, and therefore it was a sacred object. And when rainwater would hit the object and collect within the basins or little crevices within the meteorite, the water was used as a powerful source for purifying, cleansing, and healing. The interesting thing with that one is when the Native American Grave Repatriation Act was passed, the Clackamas wanted the meteorite returned to Oregon. And that then ensued about 10 years of negotiations. And if you go to the website for the National Museum of Natural History and pull up the Willamette meteorite, it'll explain that eventually what they agreed to was that one day a year, they would close the gallery that it is within, and the Clackamas would come and spend the day in that room doing whatever they do, praying, dancing, singing. Nobody's allowed in there. And so that was their resolution to the NAGPRA issue. Pacuame meteorite in New Mexico was found actually in a medicines man pouch, a little leather pouch. And interestingly, when we gave a talk not too long ago about meteorites, in central Arizona. After the talk, a Hopi came up to me and he introduced himself as a medicine man. And he said that he carries a pouch when he's doing healing that contains meteorite fragments, actually from Meteor Crater, that we'll be talking about in a little bit. And last but not least, I'm working with a professor from Wichita State University, and he's writing a book on sacred places of the Plains Indians, one of which is the Red River area. And the Red River meteorite down there is thought to have healing properties. So as you can see here, there's a lot of spiritualness to meteorites, and they were very much sought after. So moving to Arizona now, one of the largest was the Navajo meteorite, and I say found in quotes in 1931 in Apache County, buried by the Navajo with rock debris at the base of a cliff. They literally buried it once they found it. They said they found it around 1600. When they found it, it had, if you will, petroglyphs carved into the rock, and you can barely make out some of them in this photo here. There's some over here. There's actually a stick figure with his head is kind of like rays of light coming out of his head. And they said it was made by the prehistoric pottery makers, which would have been the Hopi ancestors. And so clearly it had been recognized as something sacred even before the Navajo arrived. But they buried it. They didn't want it to be taken or be used or seen by others. And so they buried it with the rock debris that was by the cliff. But in 1921, a couple Smithsonian ethnographers were nosing around for meteorites and things, and a couple Navajo took them to the site and they unburied it and took it back to Washington. And you can see in the display case there what it looked like when it was on display there. Another one, not too far from that, was the Winona meteorite. And this was found in 1928 in a stone-lined cyst, about 18 inches square, about 10 inches below the ground, near, but not in, the ruin that was referred to as a Winona ruin that was occupied about 1100 to 1300. Interestingly, as close as this is to Meteor Crater, it is not a meteorite from Meteor Crater. Neither is the Navajo meteorite. Meteorites of different types. In fact, the Winona meteorite, when it was discovered and then analyzed, it was determined to be the first type ever found in the world. And so it gave it a special name called Winonite. And as of 2021, only 54 Winonite meteorites have been found in the world. So it's pretty rare. And you can see the picture there showing it was buried in this stone-lined cyst. You'll see another one, or talk about another one shortly, similarly. And you can see the picture where you see the fragments. They said when they first found it and opened it up, it was basically an egg-shaped, almost football-sized piece of iron, weighing about 53 pounds. But when they went to pull it out, it kind of fragmented in their hands because it had been subject to the environment from snow melt and rain, and it kind of wore down the iron elements within it. But here you saw the Navajo meteorite was buried. The Winona meteorite was buried. As I said earlier, the Pacoima was not buried, but it was they built a room around it and wrapped it in a kind of a burial shroud. So we're seeing a pattern as we come along here. So that brings us to the Canyon Diablo meteorite that created Meteor Crater, which fell about 50,000 years ago. 60,000-ton meteorite created this massive crater. And astronauts actually trained within the crater before the moon landing back in the 60s. And astronauts have returned, training again for the anticipated moon landing in a couple of years. But it's really large. It's 4,000 feet wide, it's about 600 feet deep. And the visitor center is off to the right. And you can see San Francisco peaks, snow-capped peaks in the distance there as well. And you can see basically, here's Meteor Crater, Canyon Diablo. So meteorites are basically named after the close geological feature. And so Canyon Diablo is the closest, so they named this meteorite the Canyon Diablo meteorite. And this is the meteorite that started me on this whole area of study, was the Camp Verde meteorite. It was found in 1927 by an amateur collector of Indian art relics, which today we would call a pot hunter. And he was running around ruins, and he was with his big metal rod poking the ground, hoping to find some buried area. And he said when he hit this particular area, there was a thump, and he knew something was down there. And he found a stone-lined cyst, very similar to Winona, in a ruin along Clear Creek east of Camp Verde, and that's a picture of it down below. And it was described as a little pocket in the earth, walled and covered over with flat rocks. Again, similar to Winona. And we were able to find it. The slabs of rock that created are still there. There's a slab off to the left, which we assume was the rock that covered the top of it. And when it was found, he describes finding it wrapped in a turkey feather blanket, which is a very sacred object. So between that and the location, you can see the little arrow there. It was found in room 32. And this is opposite the only open plaza that faces east or sunrise. And so because of its position, that might have been brought out for ceremonies, or it was wrapped in a turkey feather blanket, maybe left there, we're not quite sure. But between the turkey blanket and its position, we're pretty sure that it was used for ceremonial purposes. So it's pretty big. This is a picture of it. It's 2 feet wide by 1 foot tall. It's 5 inches at the base and tapers to almost a sliver point at the top. But it's 135 pounds. And studies confirmed that it is actually part of the Canyon Diablo meteorite that created Meteor Crater, but that's 53 miles away to the north. It is part of the ASU collection right now, but it is on display at the Archaeology Museum in Camp Verde. So this was the first one. While I was there studying it, I asked them, do you have any others that were found near ruins? And they said, well, we think maybe the Bloody Basin meteorite was found in a ruin. And they brought it out, and that's a picture of it there. And the story was that it was found in 1959 by an 8-year-old from Prescott who was hunting with his father and brother in the Bloody Basin area of the Tonto National Forest. And they were camping near the ancient Red Creek dwelling or ruin, which was believed to have been occupied 1150 to 1400. It had been pot hunted so bad over the years that there's, for example, 0 decorated pottery, which makes it very difficult to date the site. It's relatively small. That's about the size of a big potato, 6 inches by 3 by 3, only weighs about 11 pounds. And again, it was confirmed to be part of the Canyon Diablo meteorite, but now we're talking 78 miles as the crow flies before you get to Meteor Crater. So the big question was, how did they carry, or did they bring the 135-pound Camp Verde meteorite down to this area? Did they also collect and carry this smaller piece down the 78 miles down here? So again, asking, looking a little closer, you can barely see on this image here. You can see this little rectangular piece here, and then there's some more over here, and there's another piece up here, and there's another one way back here. And when I'm looking at it, it looked to me like carbon material. So I asked if I could put it under their microscope. And so here we have it under the microscope at ASU, and here's a close-up of it. And sure enough, it looks like, even tree rings, if you will. And so it's carbon material. And I thought, well, gee whiz, they're not positive it was in the ruin. I mean, the 8-year-old said he found it, brought it back to the camp. Did he find it in the ruin, near the ruin? Who can tell? And so I asked ASU if I could actually take a sample of this carbon material and get it carbon dated. And it was approved. And so I took, I forget, 10 or 15 micrograms of the carbon material and sent it down to Beta Analytics down in Miami for carbon dating. And this is the result that came back. And you can see at the top, it calibrated at 95% probability. They came up with 2 different dates. Radiocarbon dates are fluctuating, and so they grab these dates as the most reliable or more significant dates. But you can see it's 1275 to 1315, another segment 1355 to 1390. But you look in the center there, the intercept of the carbon age with calibrated curve is around 1290 AD. And so all this can really tell us is that it was definitely in the ruin, because the wood is dated from the time of the occupation of the ruin. I can't say if it was in an altar. I can't say if it was part of the wall structure, or was it part of a fire ring. I really can't tell exactly how it was used in the ruin. All we can say from the carbon dating is definitely it was in the ruin when it was when some kind of fire occurred. And so so this basically becomes the second proven meteorite that have been actually in a ruin. And then another one that they had is referred to as the Fossil Springs meteorite. You can see a picture of it there on the left. And in this map here, it was found, there was a power plant down here in Childs, and it was using the water coming down Fossil Creek. And this one gentleman, his job was to walk along the creek every day and make sure it was being blocked so that the water could flow into the power plant. And he said he found it between Pine, the town of Pine, and the town of Childs, and right here where it refers to as Fossil Springs. And so he found it there along the creek. Well, there's no ruins along the creek. However, there's over 100 ruins on the cliff above Fossil Creek looking down. And so the big question is, was it in the ruin there and it fell down, or exactly how did it get there? Again, it's near ruins, but we can't say that it was in the ruins. But again, when they studied it, they said it was definitely part of the Canyon Diablo meteorite. And this again is 59 miles away from, as the crow flies, to Meteor Crater. You might have noticed on this meteorite, there are these plus and negative pieces of tape here. This was one of the meteorites within the collection of Dr. Harvey H. Meininger. He is considered the father of American meteoritics. He had a meteorite museum in Denver at the Museum of Natural History. He also started a museum near Meteor Crater and then moved it to Sedona. And he's credited with about 140 discoveries related to meteorites, and one of which was with a very fine compass, you can find out that an iron meteorite has both positively and negatively charged areas within its mass. And that's what the positive and negative tapes are all about there. And then just recently, ASU called and said, hey, we had somebody bring in a meteorite, and it turns out it's Canyon Diablo. So it was found in 2017 on Dead Man's Mesa in the Tonto National Forest, near the town of Strawberry, so they named it the Strawberry Meteorite. It's very small, 2 inches by 2 inches by 1 inch, weighs barely a half a pound. And so I was put in contact with the owner and went and visited them over in Strawberry and looked at it, took some pictures. And when you look at it up close, and as I said, they definitely said it was part of the Canyon Diablo meteorite again. When you look up close and you're holding it, you can see this depression here toward the bottom. Your thumb fits in there just perfectly, and your finger wraps around the back end here. And as far as I can tell, it looks like it was used as a scraper or a knife. This edge is very shiny, so it shows a lot of wear. And so whether they recognize it as a meteorite, it's possible to say. It was found only a little ways away from from several field houses that were along the edge. So let's see. And so that's another meteorite that was found near the area. So when you plot all of these, you've got the Camp Verde meteorite, 53 miles. Here's the crater up on top. 53 miles Camp Verde, 54 miles Strawberry, 59 miles Fossil Springs, 78 miles Bloody Basin. And so all of these were found quite a distance. Now, when we talk about the distance, you see here's the plains in the kind of orangey color, and then you're getting into canyons and mountains, et cetera, through here. So the distance would have been much larger on foot and much more difficult to traverse. So the question became, well, how did these people acquire these meteorites that came all the way from Meteor Crater? The literature, actually the Handbook of Iron Meteorites, which is kind of a very authoritative volume, the author says he assumed that all of these were manually transported by Indians. That's the way he puts it in the book. And in archaeological terms, that those are referred to as manuports, manually transported to their location from wherever it originated. And so could that have been the case? Were they actually collected? So I went back to Meteor Crater, and this is an 1895 U.S. Geological Service map of Meteor Crater. And you can see how the depths and the area around it. And interestingly, at the south, circled in red, there were 3 ruins that they noted in 1895. And off to the east side, there was another ruin. I have this one circled in purple because I'm going to show you a picture of it in a bit. And to decide whether or not people were collecting these and then trading them, I actually got a permit to walk around to the south side, which is generally not available to the public. And we went down there looking for these. The one towards the far south no longer exists. It's now a part of a silicate mine. They were mining in the 20s and 30s, and it got destroyed with that. But these upper two were interesting, and I could not find them. But I found this article to the left here. You see that was in the collections of the Meteorological Society in October of 1950, done by Dr. Lincoln La Paz of the University of New Mexico. He was with the Institute of Meteoritics. And he mentions in here towards the bottom that they did an archaeological investigation carried out by the Institute at the crater in the summer of 1950, and they actually excavated the entire ruin. And he refers above to Ohio State University meteorite expedition of 1939 that actually found Indian artifacts around the ledge. Interestingly, still digging, that's why I say this is a work in progress, have not been able to locate this Ohio State University Meteorite Expedition report. Ohio State University Library tells me they don't have it, so I'm looking for other possibilities. Likewise, University of New Mexico at Maxwell has no record of this excavation by La Paz. I even went to the Santa Fe, New Mexico repository and to see what they had, and they had nothing about this expedition. So whatever they excavated, whatever they took, whatever their field notes and photographs are, they're buried somewhere. My guess is buried somewhere in the basement of the Institute of Meteoritics, and we're still trying to press them to open some doors and try to find it. But I did get the chance, like I said, to go and look. When you get down here, these ruins, there's nothing that really tells you whether or not they did. As I said, I did find this particular ruin there. This is actually a picture of it rather than just a drawing. So here's the crater. Here are the three ruins to the south. This one, at least, it's either this one or both of them, what the University of New Mexico excavated. And the one far out here to the east is the one I was able to find. But in this very, very short preliminary analysis done by La Paz, he said it was a single room structure, centralized fire pit, local stone, very crude masonry, ventilator breaks in the walls, entry was through the roof. So there must have been some roofing material there when he was there, which we could not find. He estimated it was built around 1300 based on the pottery sherds, which is consistent with what we know. And he makes absolutely no reference or mention of any meteoritic fragments in that wall. So again, a big question. So we did find the fourth ruin. Here it is here up against a big outcropping of rock. You can see the wall here along the sides. And this is recessed in here, and actually you could lay in there. It's a very nice, comfortable little bed. But again, we found some pottery there, but no meteoritic fragments anywhere near it. But interestingly, was this used as a collection center? Kind of doubt it, because when you walk around the side, up back by the tree here, and you walk up, there's actually stairs at the back of it, and it brings you right to the very top. And when you're up there, you get this tremendous view of the plain below, the plains below Meteor Crater. So one suggestion is it might have been a hunting blind or a place to camp for hunting. And you would be able to see whatever animals were coming across here. So it didn't help a lot. This picture up here on the left is actually from one of Dr. Neininger's studies. He studied the Meteor Crater for 18 years, and he collected chert material, obsidian, projectile points, a little bit of pottery bits or whatever. And so we know that Native Americans were at the site. But were they collecting meteorite fragments? We just don't know. So if it wasn't collected at Meteor Crater, or it wasn't traded, the only other option is that they happened to find it at the point in which it was found, wherever it landed. And so we have these four meteorites: Camp Verde, Bloody Basin, Fossil Springs, and Strawberry. Two were confirmed to be in ruins, two were near ruins. But again, the handbook for all of them says that they were manually transported from Meteor Crater to their sites by Indians, is what he says in the book. But when you go through the rest of his handbook, what you find is that there are 6 additional meteorites that were all confirmed to be from Canyon Diablo. that were not near any ruins at all. They're out in plains areas or in the woods. And but even then, he says that they were manually transported by Indians to their location. So when you plot all of these, you've got the Meteor Crater in the middle. You've got, as you get down here, Camp Verde, Strawberry, Fossil Springs, Bloody Basin. And then you add these others, Wickenburg, way south, Ehrenberg, Fair Oaks, Ash Fork, and then to the north, Ganado and Hoke. You have this whole big stream of meteorite fragments from Meteor Crater, or from Canyon Diablo meteorite that created the crater, scattered around. And so you start to wonder, just, how did all of this get out there? And by way of thinking further, how did the Native Americans find them? So what we concluded is that rather than, from various studies, rather than this meteorite being a single large mass, the Canyon Diablo meteorite was a heavily fragmented swarm. Most people think of a meteorite as one big large chunk of metal or stone, but actually some of them are referred to as swarms. So as this large asteroid is plummeting through the universe for billions of years, it gets hit by other things, breaking it apart. But its momentum keeps a lot of the fragments together, and so it becomes a swarm of thousands of pieces. And so as you see the second dot, the majority of material, when it's entering an atmosphere, is ejected around the surrounding area before impact. So even before it hits the ground, the material is being strewn all over the place as it hits air, and it's being forced to be separated from the mass. And therefore, small fragments can separate from the swarm and land on plains tens of kilometers away from the crater as individual. And since the highest concentration of fragments of Meteor Crater occurs in northeast, it's strongly suggestive that the impact direction came from the southwest. So if that's the case, you look at all of these meteorites that were found there, and you plot the southwest trajectory, which is called an equatorial band, and you find that all of these are within this equatorial band coming from the southwest. And some of them fall off before they reach the crater, before the impact, and at the point of impact, as it says, a lot of the debris is to the northeast, so it could have thrown these large fragments, the Granado and Hope, much farther away from the crater. So all of these are in this equatorial band, and so the suggestion is that these 10 fragments were detachments from the main mass during its atmospheric passage, and that the aerodynamic deflection allowed the fragments to enter into new trajectories that allowed them to slow down to terminal velocity and impact outside the crater area. And the material removed from the main mass would be expected to have originated along this equatorial band. The motion of it, etc., the airflow that it was creating would have kept all these within this one particular band. And whether it was before impact or beyond impact, it would have stayed on this band. And so the conclusion for the ruins found, meteorites found within these ancient dwellings within the Sedona Verde Valley area, is that these 4 meteorites were found in there, most likely were the result of chance collecting at their point of landing, rather than being manually transported by the Native American people. And that's our paper. So I was asked to keep about 30 minutes, so we have time for questions. So went a little fast, I understand that, but we can go into questions if you like.
Thank you so much, Ken. We do actually have a few questions. Some of them are from earlier in your presentation. I'm going to go ahead and pose them, but I think you may have touched on some of them already. So let's start with this first one. A question about ancient people who didn't actually see these meteorites land. How did they identify them as otherworldly or as meteorites? How do we have any information that helps us with that?
Right. Well, most of the meteorites that are found and recognized by Native Americans are iron meteorites. And iron meteorites are extraordinarily heavy, much heavier than regular rock. They also usually have a black or brownish hue to them. They often will look like they're melted or there's these bubbles in them. They just look different. And there is all kind of records where Native Americans had actually witnessed falls. And so once you witness a fall and you see what landed, right away you start passing that along as to what they looked like when they fell. So in fact, There are several that in the records that said Native Americans had found them and took them back and worked with them. So mostly it's the iron meteorites. Actually, the most of meteorites that enter the atmosphere are called stony meteorites, and they look just like a river cobble. As they're traveling through the atmosphere, they start to roll and they get smoothed off, and when they hit the ground, it looks like a big river cobble. And so unless you really know what you're doing and what they look like, you'll never find a stony meteorite. There are stony iron meteorites that have proportions of both, but they also will look more like a stone. And so it's interesting that 95% of the meteorites that land on Earth are stony meteorites, but 95% of the meteorites in collections are iron meteorites because they're easier to find. You can find them with metal detectors, they look different. And so it's a very odd distribution between the two types of meteorites. But yeah, that's a very common question. But once you see a few, they look similar and they're very heavy, much heavier than any regular rock.
Sure, absolutely. So a question specific to the winonite, did I say that correctly?
Yes, winonite.
Is there any idea of the cosmic origin of the winonite meteorite?
They actually consider that to be part of the Big Bang. Some of the oldest meteoritic material in the universe, because it's such an unusual aged mineralogical component. And interestingly, there was the one found in Arizona, there was one found in Texas, but the majority of them have been found in Antarctica. And they do these double expeditions twice a year in Antarctica. And think about it, it's a big white plains, and when a meteorite hits the ground, it's usually black or brown. You're going to see it from miles away. And so there are these big collections in Antarctica every year. And so a lot of the winonites ended up there. But it's yeah, it's considered to be, because there's still only 54 have been found in the world, part of the original Big Bang.
All right, thank you. Has anyone outside of archaeology studied the locations of other meteorites from the Diablo Fall?
There's a lot of papers on the Hopewell meteorites. There's some papers on the Willamette up in Oregon. As I said, I was working with a professor from Wichita State, and he's doing this book on sacred places of the Plains Indians, and he has a chapter on the use of meteorites among the Plains Indians. And they have some interesting interpretations. When they see a shooting star, for example, they'll say it's an omen that somebody important is going to die, or that they're just it's bad news usually. But then again, they sometimes regard them as sacred objects. One interesting interpretation is, think about what it is. It's a big brown piece of metal that falls from the sky, and some Plains Indians refer to them as the feces of the gods. So it's just logic, So
Sure.
so it's interesting. But yes, there are a few people studying some of that as well. There's actually a couple of really good articles out there about the use of meteorites among Native American cultures around the world.
So you just tapped into the next couple of questions that I think I'll group together. These actually speak to me. In my previous life, I was a children's librarian. And so the myths and stories have always fascinated me. You've got a couple people that are wanting to know about mythical stories, tribal tales about meteorites or things coming from the sky. Someone even asked if there's mythology of the underworld possibly involved. Do you have any information relating to that angle?
Well, and there are some stories about, for example, Meteor Crater. It was created by the coyotes, and it was they came down from the sky and created Meteor Crater. So there are some stories relative to Meteor Crater. The Hopi, who are the main ones that I correspond with and deal with, the cultural director and some of their Katsina priests, etc., they're very reluctant to talk about it. If there are stories, they have not shared it with me. There are several rock art images that deal with celestial activity, and I'll go to the cultural director of Zuni or Hopi, and I'll say, well, this looks like such and such a story from the past, and I get this poker face, and it's like, and that's fine. I mean, it's their culture, their way. They want to share it, great. If they don't, that's okay. I don't want to look like I'm intruding or anything. And so, the unfortunate answer to that question is, have not found a lot of stories related to meteorites. No.
Okay. Let's see. Someone said, I thought I had heard a story of a more recent meteorite that impacted a village in the Sinagua and caused destruction there. Is there any evidence of this that you know of?
There have not been any recent falls in this area. There's been some falls just to the south that they've located. I don't recall it creating any destruction here in Arizona. There was one, I can't remember exactly where it was, where it fell through a woman's bedroom roof and she wasn't hurt. There's a picture in one of the internets of where Meteorite came and went through the hood of a car, dented it pretty bad. But and a lot of times the really large ones, like in Russia and other places, they cause massive destruction of the environment, of trees and all that kind of stuff. But I don't recall any nearby in this area. No. All right.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's see. How far back in years can we trace oral histories of indigenous people that would be talking about, well, I guess not just meteorites, but do you have any idea how far back it goes?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question. It's only been in the last couple decades where archaeologists seem to be paying more attention to oral history. It's just like rock art. Rock art was discounted as just something. It had no particular meaning until around 1975. And then they started tracing it to actual stories that have been carried on for hundreds of years and religious ceremonies, etc. So rock art started to become a little more widely accepted. That's one reason why, for example, the Hopi, they hate the term referring to them as prehistoric, their culture, because prehistory is what? It's before the written word. And so they point to the rock art and they say, well, there's our written word. You may not understand it, but that's our written word. And so they don't like the term prehistoric too much. So as far as how back they go, I mean, you talk to a lot of the elders, and they'll say this has been passed on for hundreds and hundreds of years, before they even came to America, our United States area here. So it's literally, many generations.
Okay. A question about the strawberry fragment, the meteorite that was found. Yes. That one.
Strawberry.
Does it show any signs of being worked, or is its usefulness as a scraper a happy accident?
Probably a happy accident. That's what I'm thinking. And when you hold it, it's interesting. Your thumb just immediately falls into that little groove, and the crux of your hand just wraps around it, just so naturally. And so the little place where your thumb goes probably was worn away. It makes it even a nicer fit. And so the edge that you're holding, when you hold it that way, the edge is right there for scraping or use it as a knife. And it's straight as an arrow, and it's shiny, which suggests definitely that it was used. So personally, I think it was just a lucky happenstance, because it's a little heavier than a regular rock, but hey, it's not even a half a pound. So it wouldn't immediately register, I don't think, to them that it was a meteorite.
So another question related
to, if I interrupt, that adds to the theory that it was found at the place where it fell, as opposed to being brought down from Meteor Crater.
All right, so this other question is related to the tools. This one's actually a keen question, I think. How were they able to work the iron meteorites without iron tools?
I know. That's always amazing. Well, some of you may remember Tutankhamun in Egypt was buried with a iron dagger, and it was an iron dagger, and it was made at least 1,000 years before they understood smelting in Egypt. So 1,000 years before they understood how to smelt iron, how did they create this piece of iron, and where did it come from? And they eventually figured out that it actually came from the Alexandrian meteorite, a fragment of that, and they just worked it, and they just pounded it and scraped it until they made it into that dagger shape. Arizona State also has a couple tools that were made out of iron material, usually hatchets or hammerstones that were made out of meteorites. And the Hopewell, when you read the articles about the Hopewell meteorite tools, so they're almost like miniature tools of different types, and that rather than being used, they're almost like, well, my trade uses an awl, and here I have a piece of an awl made out of a meteorite, so something from the heavens, so a very status kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's very, very difficult. I had a person, as you might expect, I get a lot of people coming to the museum saying, "Is this a meteorite?" And so, and this fellow brought in this one piece. It was the shape of a brick. It just looked like a brick, but it was smooth on all sides. The edges were totally smooth. It was a hunk of iron that clearly had been worked, smooth as you can get it. It must have taken huge strength and a lot of back and forth motion with other rocks to get this so smooth. And he said, "Well, I think it's a meteorite, but can you tell me if it's a meteorite?" I said, "Well, I can't tell if it's a meteorite unless you leave it with me, and I might be able to get it down to ASU, and we'll put it in this atomic accelerator they got down there that can do the analysis." So he did. He left it with me, and we took it down there, and it was found out that it was a combination of iron and chromium. Well, that's very unusual. There's the only place you can find minerals that's a combination of iron and chromium is either in Washington State or upstate New York. Well, clearly it didn't come from upstate New York, so it had to come from up in Oregon as a traded item of some sort. It's very heavy because it definitely has iron in it, but it had 0 nickel. And to be a meteorite, it has to have a sizable proportion of nickel within it. And so I said, well, he said, "Well, my friend found it near a ruin." And so I said, "Well, here's the report. It's not a meteorite, but it clearly is a tool of some sort that was used. And actually, it's more like what they call now the term is escaping me, where you could actually, if you create a little cradle for it and you suspend it, it will be with the iron in it. It'll actually move around until it points to true north, to magnetic north." And so they often use that as navigational tools or tools for architecture to align their walls. And so I said, "Well, if you take me to where your friend found it, I'd be willing to buy it from you." He goes, oh, no. So my guess is he is the friend, and he went into some ruin that was in the forest and wasn't supposed to take it out, whatever. But anyhow, so it was labeled a meteor wrong, not a meteorite, meteor wrong. But a very interesting piece of metal. So
Absolutely.
I diverge. I do this a lot. So.
So other than the Navajo meteorite, do any of the other local, I'm thinking they're indicating like the Arizona area meteorites show that they were worked in any way?
Not really. There have been other falls on Navajo land, and after 1921 or whatever, they kind of shut down, and they really haven't been allowing people to come out and search. So ASU has been trying to get up there for years to get up there and investigate around the area there. But as far as using them, if they are, they're not talking about it.
Okay. So I thought that I had asked this, but Gunther, I'm going to try it again. He's asked me to repeat his question because I got something not quite right. Were any of the meteorites falls the objects people saw in the sky and then searched for them and then found them and were preserved until today? Do we have that kind of, I guess, line to follow that we know for sure that they saw them, they chased them, they found them, and they kept them?
You know about the Native Americans?
Yes.
I'm trying to think. There's stories of Native Americans seeing falls and collecting the items and using them. So like the Brenham meteorite material. Here it is in Kansas, and they found pieces of it in Ohio and Illinois. But it fell 14,000 years ago, so they did not obviously see it. But to be able to say I've seen an article where they saw it, they picked it up, and they've been using it, I can't see that I've found an article like that.
Okay. And then a question that kind of goes back to meteorites themselves and not necessarily the Native American connection. Somebody's wanting to know, why is nickel the deciding factor for identifying a meteorite?
You got to think about where these came from. Okay, these came from an area where there's no oxygen. They're flowing through the universe. Nickel and iron. There's iron, and you've heard the term iron oxide. That means that some oxygen has interacted with the iron, and it can show that it's been here. It's been terrestrial. Whereas if you find meteorites, iron, there's no oxygen in it. It's not iron oxide. But nickel is a component of iron meteorites, and it's just a unique feature. You don't find nickel and iron terrestrial here on Earth, and so the combination is one of those rare things that help identify it as a meteorite. There's a lot of other. There could be 8 or 9 or 10 different minerals within a meteorite, but you have to have a certain proportion of nickel with the iron to be able to determine that it's extraterrestrial.
Thank you for getting scientific for us. You've got, Robert would like to know when your paper is going to be completed and available. I think you've piqued some interest tonight. I've still got to find that Ohio State paper and Dr. La Paz from University of New Mexico there. I'd like to see that before we publish. We've talked about it with Arizona State Meteoritic Center, so they're all willing and ready to start working on the paper. I've got it basically drafted, and there's just some gaps here and there. Personally, I'm hoping to get it done in the spring and get it out there. I have a lot of the material about the background of the meteorites, with pictures of the meteorites, where they were found, in one of my books called Heart of the Sky. And the Hopi call the sun Heart of the Sky. And so this Heart of the Sky describes about 11 of the solar calendars that I found, sonometry receipts that I found, as well as the Central Arizona meteorites that we found. But the study about the where did it come from, how did it get here, that's still to come out next year. Excellent. We look forward to it.
And so don't quote me, because I might change something from what I said tonight.
So Ken, one other thought was put into the Q&A, not really a question, but Janine was suggesting that the person who was asking about the recent meteorite hit might be talking about the San Francisco field volcano eruption that created Sunset Crater.
I don't know. Sunset Crater or San Francisco peaks, and all of that were it was active around 1100 AD, which is and a little earlier than that. And people think that archaeologists believe that's what drew people to the Flagstaff area, was seeing the smoke and everything going on for a number of years. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what they were referring to.
A possibility. All right, just a couple of things left in the Q&A, not questions, but folks who are wanting recordings, yes, we will place the recording up on the Conservancy YouTube channel tomorrow, probably sometime in the afternoon, and I'll be emailing everybody out so that you'll know when it's posted. And then a very nice thank you to you, Ken, for being a great speaker, and for also a very engaging Q&A section, answering a lot of different questions. People really appreciated that. So, and Janine scooped in with one last question. Have you researched the Ohio History Journal for mention of the meteor search that was being published at the time?
The Ohio History Society, no, I haven't looked at that as a source. What I'm hoping is to get into University of New Mexico's Meteoritic Institute, and it's probably, since Dr. La Paz referred to it, he must have had a copy of it. So it's probably sitting there over in the Institute. If I can ever get anybody to answer an email there, but I'll keep pressing. So, but thanks for the hint. I might try that as well.
Great. Thank you very much for being with us. This was fascinating. Thank you everyone who participated. We're glad that you joined us. We will have more. We have another lecture coming up in November with Dr. Matthew Martinez from the Mesa Prieta Petroglyph Project. It's on the 16th. And so you can join us for that one also. But other than that, Ken, if you don't have anything else, I think we can close off for the evening and go find dinner.
Okay, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.